Thursday marks 51 years since the first Earth Day in 1970. On that day, millions of Americans took to the streets to protest environmental ignorance and demand a new way forward. It has since been adopted around the world. US President Joe Biden will hold an Earth Day Global Summit on climate change on Thursday as part of his efforts to elevate climate change as a top priority. It will be held virtually given the pandemic restrictions. The summit will bring together 17 countries responsible for 80% of global emissions and global GDP. The guest list of 40 nations includes Canada and Mexico, US allies in Europe and Asia, as well as Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Nigeria and South Africa. For more on this story, we're now joined via Zoom by Greenpeace Climate Change Commissioner Happy Khambule. Happy, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Thank you very much for having me, and good evening to all the viewers.
Now, Earth Day is a very important day held to demonstrate support for environmental protection, with our oceans and rivers and the air that we breathe in being incredibly polluted. Is there a reason to celebrate this day?
Well, I don't think it's really a reason to celebrate the particular day, but it's really a reason to be aware of what it represents. It's a moment in time where we can all focus on the issues that are at hand, that as whilst we are dealing with the triple challenges like in South Africa or the different challenges around the world, we still have a big problem which materially affects us all, which is issues of the environment and how the earth is actually working and how the earth is feeling and how the earth is actually dealing with us being on this planet whilst we are undertaking activities that is kind of destroy it as well.
Well, one of the highlights of this year's events will be the Leaders Summit on Climate Change hosted by United States President Joe Biden. So what's your expectation of this particular summit? Do you get a sense that all the nations under this particular pact will come to the party in terms of reaffirming their commitments?
Well, what we expect from the summit is that the President and the United States at large will start to begin to build trust with the international community due to the fact that they had also withdrawn from one of the key areas of dealing with environmental challenges, which is the Paris Agreement under the Climate Change Convention. So what we are looking forward to is that the countries that are going there are going to see the United States and are going to put pressure on the United States to increase its ambition and to start to deal with the many different facets that make up its environmental and its climate change contribution. But particularly that the other countries that are coming to the table that are going to this particular summit, like South Africa, will begin to also say, well, our contribution ourselves is no longer enough, and we need to actually put more into the rest of the world in understanding what we believe is the climate crisis. So our contribution should be a lot more ambitious. But all the countries there will be looked to rather to increase their ambition around climate action.
Remember that there was international outrage when former President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. Now that President Joe Biden seeks hell-bent on reversing some of the decisions that were taken under the Trump administration, are you at all optimistic of the direction that the United States, being the global superpower, will take as a result of policies that seek to conserve the earth?
Well, as I said, the United States will be going into this particular discussion, this summit, looking to build trust as they withdrew, as I said before. But really, because they've also mentioned and also assented back into the Paris Agreement, they're going to have to show that they mean business. So it's also going to be about domestic actions that they can take within their own sphere, like the ban of fossil fuel vehicles or the internal combustion engine in some cases, and making sure that it is phasing out of fossil fuel use within its economy within a period of time. So there's a lot of steps that need to be taken by the United States to show that it is taking climate change seriously. But at the same time, everyone else who's going there needs to show that, well, we are doing so much. You as a superpower, you need to do more in order to address what is fundamentally a historical responsibility for countries like yourself as a superpower.
And some of the countries most affected by climate change are still making commitments to protect the planet. Has there been progress on this front?
Well, the progress has not been enough. There has been improvement in many accounts. Some countries are actually moving backwards. A lot of Asian countries and some of the countries in Africa as well are kind of taking a step back and not doing what they need to do more of. But again, this is the role where leadership internationally will step in and say, look, we are wanting to do X. We are willing to put our foot on ahead. We're willing to put this on the table. We are hoping that you will come along with us, and we will fix what we've done in the past. But now, as we move ahead in addressing this particular challenge, we're going to do more. In our case, again, in South Africa, with what we've put down, it is not enough. We are rated by many analysts as highly insufficient, and in some cases, with the new draft contribution that we've put forward, we are seen as insufficient. We need to do a little bit more to show that we're taking this problem seriously, because we're already feeling the impact.
I mean, you lament the fact that not enough progress has been made with regards to conserving the earth or the policies thereof. So what's your overall impression of whether countries are reaffirming their commitments to save the earth?
I mean, the countries are saying a lot, which is, in some cases it's good, but in many cases the real action, the regulatory framework, the environment in which the countries are acting in, including the laws that they are putting forward, aren't showing that what they are saying meets the practical actions that are being undertaken. So there's one side that the countries are indicating, like, for example, countries are saying that by 2050, we're not going to have economies that are actually emitting emissions. In 2030, we're going to be X amount of our emissions are going to be below business as usual. We are going to do more in order to show that we care. But in reality, countries are still agreeing to coal plants. Countries are still agreeing to power stations that are coal-fired or that are gas-fired. So things that are actually leading to the problem, which is climate change, or which are leading to the problem, which is air pollution, which is water pollution, which is land degradation, are being done more of, whilst they are communicating that they're doing something. But the reality on the ground is that we are still facing a key environmental crisis in many respects. And it's not just climate, but also in oceans as well as in rivers and our land use.
Environmentalists are of the opinion that land conservation must double by the year 2030 to prevent dangerous warming and the unraveling of ecosystems. Now, at the pace that we are moving and with the level of commitments that we have, or we are at in terms of reaffirming our commitments to some of these climate conventions, are we on course to achieve this plan?
We actually are standing at a point where we've got the opportunity to make the right decisions moving ahead. So we know what at least how much of the land surface we need to be able to protect globally, but we also know how much of the oceans we need to protect in terms of 30% of the ocean needs to be protected at least by 2030. 30% of the land use that we have, or the land surface area that we have, needs to be protected, particularly in vulnerable biodiversity hotspots. So we know what we need to do. The real answer here is that we actually need to do it. The problem is that we're not dealing with just one problem. We're not dealing with just one issue, which is just land. We're also dealing with issues that are ocean-related, as well as the critical biodiversity hotspots that we have, that they are falling apart because we are undertaking actions that lead to their destruction. So when we undertake the act of actually fixing one particular issue, we need to look at this thing holistically. And luckily, we know what we need to do. It's really that we're at that point where we can make those decisions, and the benefits of making that decision and acting on that decision will be much far greater than where we are headed if we continue in a business as usual approach.
And there are calls for countries to double their protected zones to 30% of the Earth's land area. Does this sound like an ambitious plan, Happy?
It's the least we can do if we are doing what we already are doing now. It's the least we can do in order to just survive. But really what we need to be protecting is much higher than that, so that we can thrive and be in a sustainable environment. Because 30% is not a lot to be honest, to be able to hold what we are doing. The types of activities we are doing are also starting to impede in the very protected areas that we are going to want to protect today and tomorrow. So we are stuck, as I said, in a situation where the decisions we are making will enable us to at least move in the right direction, but also if we continue in the same direction, whilst we know what we are doing, we're not going to get to a point where we can save at least 30%. So it's not ambitious. It is just the bare minimum that we can do and possibly see if we do not go in a radical direction.
And are we still on course to keeping climate change under the danger zone target of 1.5 degrees Celsius?
Currently, we are sitting at about 1.2 degrees warming. So by 2025, we should be hitting 1.5 degrees. If we go in the same trajectory, and as I said, it's really that we're at the tipping point. So things are getting worse, but if you consider that 1.5 degrees is also the fact that it is a global average. It's not the national localized temperature average, right? So for a region like SADC, we're talking about 2.5, 2 degrees to even 3 degrees at times, because the range is almost double in certain areas, and in certain areas it's lower. So the global average is what we get. But when we look at what we are facing at a local level, we're facing much higher temperatures. But if we continue, as I said, in the direction that we are going in, more coal, more oil, more gas, we're going to be stuck in a situation where by 2025, we're at 1.5. So we'll achieve it, but we will not limit it. So by 2020, by 2050, by 2030, we'll be seeing much higher temperatures, and the impacts will be far, far worse than what we face currently.
No doubt that all citizens need to play their part in terms of conserving the earth and conserving the environment. So what is it on an individual basis that we should do to play our part?
Well, I think the moment where we can be shopping and we can be making decisions around the types of things that we buy, the types of things that we sell, or the types of things that we use for our services are much better is there, and it makes sense. But now it has to be that when we make decisions that are about our future, as well as who's going to represent us in particular areas, we need to ask them those questions, like, what are you going to be doing in order to stop this particular problem? Because the more it gets worse, the more it happens, the less we are able to achieve that better life, that sustainable living, and actually see the future that we want to see. So we need to make it a political issue in order for these things to become a reality, in order to fix the problem. So as much as we can be buying better things, which is great, which makes it easier, but the actual problem is that the decision makers need to see this as a key issue. So we need to be talking to our leaders. We need to talk to each other about how we can make things better, and who represents us, can they actually fix the problems that we're facing, like the landslides, like the floods, like making sure that our infrastructure can withhold the likely impacts that we're going to be facing because we're still going in this direction? Or can we find leaders that are going to tell us, hey, this is the vision that we have in order to address the problem? So it has to become a political issue now. It's no longer just an economic, technological fix. We need to start talking to the leaders to say, this is a problem, we need to fix it. Put your heads together, because we are going into a very, very dire situation.
All right, Happy Khambule, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your analysis on this matter.
Thank you very much.
That was Greenpeace Climate Change Commissioner Happy Khambule speaking to us live via Zoom to share his thoughts on all matters climate change. And as tomorrow, remember that it marks 51 days since the Earth Day 2021.